kind of use and are used to from Adept when we're optimizing against local SEO. So all that said, jumping into what local SEO is and what local SEO is not. So local SEO is optimizing your website and online presence to ensure visibility when users conduct a search with geographic intent. So that's kind of a mouthful. I coined that definition myself, happily. So really, though, it's centered around Google's ability to determine intent behind a search, which obviously has grown significantly over the past several years. There's been a number of algorithm updates, for instance, that are centered around local SEO and centered around Google's ability to determine what the actual intent behind a search query is. So Google is now much better than it was, let's say, 3, 4, 5 years ago at determining what people are actually looking for when they're not including every word that they're looking for in their search query. So it's no longer centered around near me searches, for instance. We're actually looking at like searches like near me, or that include a city name or a geo modifier, as you might call it, but also looking at searches like jewelry stores or hobby shop or diesel engine repair service. So a lot of those keywords and queries that Google recognizes as, this person's actually looking for a solution within their geographic market, not just, clearly identifiable local intent searches like the near me stuff. So that's really all to say that Google is continuing to improve its natural language processing and ability to determine the intent behind a query. And really, if you're a local business like a brick and mortar shop, then obviously local SEO is going to be a huge component of your business. But even if you're not, even if you're e-commerce or B2B or a national lead generation organization, there could be opportunity for you to still be appearing in front of people when they're searching for your products and services, because there is potential that some of those products or services can be expressed or recognized as having local intent. There's been this concept floating around for the past few years of Google being your new homepage, and that's really driven because people can start and end their search journey or buyer's journey directly on search results. So Google is effectively taking every method or every measure that it can possibly take to keep people from visiting your website. So we have to take a lot of hard looks at how we can get people to engage with our business and get as much information in front of them as possible when they're searching for products or services related to our business, and they keep them from actually having to visit our website, essentially. So that would include click to calls that exist on Google Maps results. There's this newer ability to request a quote that just comes through as Google My Business messaging. You can obviously request directions or call businesses directly. You can see products or services that a business offers. Obviously, reviews has always been an integral part of Google My Business, but it's really all to say that Google is really making an effort to keep people from actually having to visit a website to find the solutions that they're looking for, especially as it applies to someone searching locally for products or services. So looking a little bit at what local SEO is not, there's a lot of talk, and there was a lot of talk, especially in the past several years, and when local SEO really started to become an integral part of an SEO strategy and conversation, that local SEO was strictly like citation management, which it's really not. So there's been a lot of efforts, I think, within local SEO thought leadership around trying to shift that and flip the script a little bit. So it's not just local SEO is equivalent to citation management, meaning managing your business information, your name, address, and phone number as it appears on a number of websites. It's actually a much larger strategy that involves optimizing against all of the factors that Google's looking at when ranking businesses within local marketplaces. Local SEO is also not exclusive from an overarching SEO strategy. So for instance, to illustrate that, I would never hire like an individual or an agency for the sole focus of optimizing for local SEO, because local SEO really is directly tied to your ability to optimize your entire website and meet the goals of a business within organic search. So local SEO is really just one piece of the SEO strategy bubble, including content and research and technical SEO, and all of that really kind of gets lumped together in what your overarching SEO strategy is, with local just being one component of that. So looking at optimizing for local visibility, we're really looking at 3 key areas. Some of my SEOs in the room might be familiar with like Google's EAT, expertise, authority, and trust, driven from their quality rater guidelines. We look at local SEO a little bit differently. Some of these factors tie a little bit more into the expertise, authority, and trust. But with being like, obviously search results change so drastically, based on the type of intent. If someone's asking a question, you could get a featured snippet. If someone's searching for a national business, you could get what we'd call more traditional search results. But as Google starts to recognize local intent, there are different factors that are involved in ranking your business for searches that express local intent. So we bucket these a little bit differently. Rather than that expertise, authority, and trust, we kind of bucket it more so with proximity, relevance, and prominence. So proximity is really as simple as it sounds. Is the business near my location? And at a surface level, it could sound like there's no real way to optimize that, right? So that it's not like we would ever recommend a business move locations to, somewhere nearby where people might be searching for. That just wouldn't, theoretically, it wouldn't be feasible for a business to like move locations to where people are searching. If a business exists at a single location, that's where they exist, and you're kind of stuck with it. But there are some tactics involved with proximity that we'll kind of talk over a little bit that do allow you to optimize against that as a ranking factor. Another key piece here is relevance. So this would be a little bit more aligned with the more traditional SEO way of thinking, in that obviously you have to have the content that meets the needs of the searcher. You need to be using the most appropriate keywords within your content, be topically relevant to the search query itself. So that kind of aligns with the more traditional SEO ways of thinking, in that your page content and your business should be related to the search result in order to rank for that, or related to the search query rather, in order to rank for that query. And then looking at prominence, so these, you can kind of think of prominence more, if you're familiar with SEO, as the offsite ranking factors. So the prominence is really kind of tied more to that third-party validation. So for instance, citations would technically fall into this, even though it's not as important of a ranking factor as it used to be. Citations, for instance, like Better Business Bureau, or the ones that like nobody uses, like Yellow Pages Goes Green or NavMe, those ones that are kind of would be looked at historically as ways of optimizing your name, address, and phone number, and producing business information on a number of websites for the sole focus of ranking locally. Google kind of downplays those a little bit now. I think that there's still some level of involvement with citations and your ability to rank well locally, but it's a little bit different in that Google is looking more at like niche citations directly related to your business. And we'll kind of talk over a little bit of that within the tactics section. But in essence, prominence is related to the validation and the authority that you're leaving on other people's websites, and how other people are talking about your business and your services that you're offering. So online reviews would also play a role in that prominence factor. So looking at bringing it all together tactically, one of the things that we look at when we're talking about proximity as a ranking factor that we try to optimize against is actually what we would call Google My Business spam removal. This is a really key tactic. If anyone is familiar with Joy Hawkins and Sterling Sky, this is a huge piece of the conversation that business does. It essentially involves removing fake or spammy business listings from search results. It surfaced a few years back that Google kind of confirmed that proximity is a ranking factor within local search results. So as part of that, as soon as a ranking factor for organic search is kind of confirmed by Google, people start looking for ways to take advantage of it. So one of the ways that people tend to do that is by creating fake listings, or creating listings that use a lot of keywords in their business names. So like this plumber, for example, bathroom and kitchen plumbing, block drains, hot water heaters, blah, blah, blah. If keywords are used in a business name, it technically can contribute to improved ranking for the terms that you're using in the business name, but it is completely against Google's guidelines. So one of the things that we do from a local SEO perspective is go in and remove fake listings, or remove listings or edit listings that are kind of operating against Google's quality guidelines and guidelines for representing your business on search. So we would go in and suggest an edit, for example, to this one and try to remove all of those additional keywords, remove that keyword stuffing, revise it to be the actual business name. We find a lot, like for lawyers, for instance, if you're a lawyer that operates in Columbus, Ohio, but for whatever reason you're trying to get additional business from San Francisco, you might create like a fake listing within San Francisco, verify it using like a PO box or using a friend's address in San Francisco that receives the postcard from Google for verification, and then you'll have your own listing over there. That is completely against Google's guidelines for representing your business on Google or representing your services on local search. So we would go in and we tend to, for B2C services or B2B services, look at Street View and see like if we can clearly identify that this is actually like a residential address, then we can report those to Google using their spam submission form. And Google more often than not will be pretty receptive of that unless they have a strong reason to believe that the business actually operates out of a home address, which is possible, obviously, but in most cases, if Google can validate that it's not a real business, that this business doesn't actually exist at this address and is instead actually located somewhere else, and they just created this listing for the sake of ranking high in a local market, then that listing can be removed. So in doing all of that, we're really limiting the amount of competition within our immediate proximity, which is boosting the proximity signals that Google is applying to our location, because we're effectively limiting the competition in the marketplace. So this is a screenshot of some results that can come just from spam removal as a tactic. This screenshot is from a tool called Local Falcon, which looks at your actual Google Maps position based on your zip code or like an actual street corner that you're on. Google can change, obviously, the businesses that are going to be ranking within a local marketplace based on if you're across the street from the business or 5 miles away from the business or in a different zip code. And performing a search, or if you're actually like located within the business. So the proximity as a ranking factor is really how close you are to that business. But if you're removing a lot of the competition that exists around you and in your local marketplace, you're going to have a much higher ability to rank within a broader spectrum outside of the immediate proximity of your business, because you're removing all of the fake listings that exist. So that image to the left is what it looked like prior to implementing a spam removal strategy. Where the business was ranking in Google Maps, anywhere from positions 4 to positions 9 or 10 or 12. And then the image to the right, you can see that they moved up significantly in their ability to rank in Google Maps to more like that position 1, 2, and 3, or that battle zone or those golden spots from an SEO perspective. I will say that this case study and these screenshots weren't actually from someone that I had worked on. This is stolen from a case study from Joy Hawkins. So I will apply credit where credit is due there, because she is from a lot of local SEO perspectives, like she spearheaded a lot of the Google spam removal as a tactic for local search. So this one was taken from her. Another tactic that is super vital in your ability to adequately meet the needs of a local search is producing content on your website that allows them to get the information that they're looking for and lead them down the conversion funnel. So typically, like more often than not, that comes in the format of a location page. And there are several things that we always make sure are included on location pages to ensure that we're getting people the information that they want and adequately optimizing against the relevancy signals that apply to a given query. So if you're searching, for instance, for SEO companies in Columbus, Ohio, if you have on your location page content around the service of SEO and how you provide it out of that physical location, then that's going to improve your relevancy signals for your ability to show up for those service-based queries. We also recommend that all clients or all people trying to optimize for local search results include some level of social proof on those location pages. And that plays into your ability to include the core keywords on your location pages. If someone talks about a specific product or service that you're offering out of that location, then you're going to have a greater ability to show up if you include testimonials related to that product or service, obviously for the keyword use and also for that third-party validation that people are actually, you know, obviously going to be more likely to convert if they see that other people have had a positive experience in working with you. So those are kind of like some of the foundational things: the list of services, the social proof in the format of case studies and or testimonials. And then obviously you can't overlook the location specific content, being like the contact information, like where you actually physically located, you know, what's your address, what is your phone number, all of that good stuff. Because, you know, believe it or not, a location page sometimes can have that information buried deep in the page. So we typically advise that that's kind of near the top, because it's what people are most likely going to be looking for when visiting a location page. So the location page tactic obviously works for locations with like, you know, 2 locations or more. We advise generally that if you have multiple locations, like 30, 40, 50 in various different states or various different metros, that we should probably pursue a tactic where we create content in silos that applies to those specific locations or to those specific metros. So for instance, an example might be having 2 subdirectories on your website, one for Columbus and one for Cleveland. Potentially that would include a location page, links to case studies that actually were created against customers that had services that were, you know, located at that physical location, internal links to the most appropriate service pages, and potentially service pages within that directory that apply specifically to that location, as long as you're not creating duplicate content across 20 or 30 or 50 locations, and location specific testimonials, and potentially even location specific testimonial pages. One other call out specific, tying this back to Google My Business, is if you are a business that has a single location, generally you probably want to just be linking to your homepage on Google My Business. If you have multiple locations, then it's probably going to be most appropriate to be linking to your actual location page, because that's going to get people the content that they need the most, and it's going to be able to most adequately meet the needs of a local searcher. Whereas if you're a single location business, you can kind of meet the needs of that local searcher with your homepage content. We also, you know, while those citations that no one really looks at, like the NavMe and the you know, Chamber of Commerce or Better Business Bureau in some instances, those ones matter a little bit less now than they did maybe like 4 or 5 years ago. It is still important to keep citation building as a core tactic within your local SEO repertoire, just because there are opportunities to effectively influence how Google ties your business to the relevancy and prominence signals related to the products and services that you offer. So one of the things that we like to pursue is identifying where we can manually build citations related to specific niches or specific industries. So for example, if we were working with like a retail jewelry company, we might pursue the Knot as a really good opportunity for building a citation, because if you're selling engagement rings and you're on a website that produces content for people who are interested in planning a wedding, then Google's going to look at that and say, okay, you know, you're listed on this site that's applicable to wedding venues and planning weddings, and you sell engagement rings, and kind of work those 2 pieces together and identify that, you know, you must be pretty prominent in your industry to be listed on this website. So again, in citations, focusing really on the niche ones that matter the most for your industry. One of the methods for doing that is by searching for, like, we have kind of a series of methods that we use for prospecting. But one of the things that we like to do is just some hardcore Googling, looking at like best product or service in market. So for instance, like best engagement ring jeweler in Columbus, Ohio, and getting listed on all of the best of lists that appear there. One of the things to be wary of is a lot of those are going to end up being paid. So you're going to have to actually like pay for some of those placements. But some of them are actually free or offer like at least a free option. For the paid ones, it's a matter of assessing whether or not it makes sense for your business to be listed there. Is it going to provide a reasonable return? What does that website rank for? Are you going to be able to get in front of people who you wouldn't be able to get in front of otherwise? And using all of those factors to determine if it's going to be really worth the effort and worth the time and worth the money to get listed on some of those best of websites. But more often than not, there's going to be a number of websites that you're going to be able to identify and prospect and build citations on that are going to be specific to your industry that actually aren't going to cost any money. So obviously prioritizing those more than the ones that you would have to pay for, and also taking into account which ones are going to provide followed links back to your website. Because as you know, a general SEO strategy and related more to the expertise, authority, and trust, and that more traditional SEO focus, obviously backlinks to your website are going to matter pretty significantly in your ability to rank for the products and services that you offer. So prioritizing the citations that are unpaid, that provide followed links to your website, and that are related to your industry is going to be a great way to pursue citation building as a local SEO tactic. Obviously, you can't talk about local SEO without having Google My Business as a significant piece of that, significant tactic involved there. So Google's released a number of updates and additions and new attributes related to Google My Business over the past several years. For instance, like product categories. So if you're a retailer, you can actually list your products directly on search results. And I think that there are even a couple APIs that are floating around out there that can work to align your online inventory with your in-store inventory and align that with your Google My Business listing. So people can see like live inventory directly on their Google My Business listings, which could be a really effective tactic in getting people actually in your, into your physical location, if that's your goal, or to purchase online if you also offer e-commerce services. We definitely take a hard look at primary and secondary categories. Google really looks at primary categories in particular when ranking local businesses as a huge relevancy signal. Obviously, if your primary category is marketing agency, you're probably not going to be able to rank very well for someone searching for a jewelry store or vice versa. So making sure that the primary category aligns most appropriately with the products and services that you're trying to rank for within your local market. And then continuing to keep a close eye on that, just because Google releases new product categories or removes product categories on a pretty regular basis. So we have a number of tools that we use, for instance, to identify what categories are currently available and making sure that we're always using the most appropriate primary category when we're categorizing businesses in Google My Business, and then being very inclusive in your utilization of secondary categories. Making sure that your primary category is obviously like the more general or clear identifier as to, you know, what is your business, and secondary categories can call out, you know, the specific services that you offer. For instance, marketing agency might be your primary category, and website developer might be a secondary category that you utilize. Also utilizing keyword use in business descriptions. Business descriptions don't actually tie directly to your ability to rank, but as someone finds your business online, if they do read the description, they are going to be more influenced to click through to your website or contact you if you do use the types of things that they're searching for in your business description. And then kind of a bonus here is the keyword utilization in reviews. So in a review generation strategy, generally you want to make sure that you're trying to prompt people to talk about specific products or services that your business prioritizes. So as an example here, Google released some key things relatively recently around like review attributes and actually extracting commonly used keywords and terms in reviews, so that first screenshot at the top there is just taken directly from a Google My Business like review feed that exists. So they're actually calling out that, you know, 30 people or 33 people rather called out grooming as something that, you know, a service that they had utilized in their reviews, that they had talked about that service, and same thing with daycare. So looking at third-party validation of products and services, like where people are talking about the products and services that you offer and how they're talking about the products and services that you offer in conjunction with your site hierarchy and your website content, is really a great way to effectively try to boost your relevancy and prominence signals in the eyes of a search engine. So we use a number of methods to try to prompt people to talk about specific products or services. Like if we know, for instance, that someone was a grooming customer, we might, when we request a review from them, either via text or via email or in person, try to prompt them to actually talk about that grooming service or that grooming experience in their online review if they do leave one. So it's a really good tactic to consider, especially because it can also work in the opposite way, in that if someone expresses a lot of negative sentiment around your grooming services or around your daycare services, or those services are not identifiably prioritized in your website hierarchy, or you're not using those key terms throughout your web page content, then you're obviously going to have significantly lower relevancy and prominence signals than someone who is utilizing those things. For instance, if we had 50 bad reviews about our SEO services at Adept, then we wouldn't be able to rank as high for someone searching for an SEO firm compared to a competitor who might have 50 positive reviews on Google My Business about their SEO services. So really trying to prompt people to utilize those keywords and the services that they've utilized, the services that they've purchased from you in their online review content, and then making sure that that aligns really effectively with the services and web page content that are clearly being prioritized on your website. Having a review generation or feedback request process really kind of spans beyond SEO. Obviously, there are those SEO benefits that exist, but in addition to that, we have a lot of conversations around when we're pursuing a review generation strategy. It sometimes can actually help inform potential operational improvements to a business. So for instance, if you have a lot of negative feedback online about how your receptionist is treating people over the phone, then we might have that conversation around how can you improve the way that your people are communicating with your customers or potential customers over the phone. How can that process be improved so that people aren't having this significantly negative experience to the point where they're actually talking about it negatively online. So in addition to that SEO benefit, it's definitely worth noting that a feedback request process, while it obviously benefits SEO and can benefit conversion rates and things like that, it's important to note that having a feedback request process in place with your local business or with any business really, it can really help improve the business in general and improve the business operationally and improve customer service. So I did include a link here to a playbook that we reference pretty regularly. It kind of lays out some tactics that align with how to request reviews, when to request reviews, what should that process look like, how to monitor reviews, how to respond to reviews and things of that nature, since reviews are obviously such a significant portion of your both relevance and prominence signals. Being able to effectively improve those by having a feedback request process is going to be really vital to your ability to rank highly in search results. So just as a little bonus here, a key takeaway, I included that bit.ly link, so feel free to screenshot it while I continue to ramble. But it could potentially be helpful in a review generation strategy for various different businesses. And I think everyone should have access to it. If not, then have Tim email me and I can figure it out. And obviously we can't talk about local SEO and its impact on local businesses and foot traffic without talking about coronavirus, because it's obviously played such a significant impact, with local businesses being closed or not offering specific services or not being available at some hours. So a few key takeaways. Google's been really, really good about trying to update Google My Business and provide abilities for businesses to update their customers when they are searching. For instance, there's a new COVID-19 update Google My Business post. So Google My Business can effectively be utilized as a social channel in terms of your ability to post directly to your Google My Business listing. So one of the post types that exist is a COVID-19 update. So that would be worth pursuing if there's been any significant impact on your business, to write out a COVID-19 update post and share that with your customers as they're finding you online. Obviously, keeping business hours up to date on your website and Google My Business. Google released the temporarily closed or temporary hours features in Google My Business that are also good things to be considerate of if you are temporarily closed, or if you do have kind of different hours in all of the COVID-19 madness. Pretty recently, within the past few weeks, there are now new Google My Business attributes as well, related to, does your business offer curbside pickup? Do you offer virtual appointments? So those are all attributes that you could apply to your business if those are things that your business is currently doing in light of the pandemic. And updating location page messaging obviously would be a huge one, since that's more than likely going to be like the core business page on your website that people are going to be visiting if you are a multi-location business. So keeping your location page information and your contact information up to date, and then updating messaging on that page to make sure that you're calling out how your business has changed, or how services have changed, or product offerings have changed as a result of COVID. Another thing that is worth considering, especially if you're in retail, is aligning in-store and online inventory to showcase your products. So if you don't have like an actual like product functionality, or if you're not an e-commerce business, but you still are kind of in that retail sector, making sure that you're really capitalizing on the Google My Business products feature. There are some tools and APIs out there that can help align your Google My Business listing, like the products available on that listing, again, with your in-store inventory, if you are a retail business. But it might at least be worth calling out some of the product categories that you offer. Like some of the things that we've seen in the past is people calling out, like, where if they don't want to list all of their specific necklaces online, maybe we just call out within the products feature, like, yes, we sell diamond necklaces, or yes, we sell engagement rings, without aligning that completely with the actual in-store inventory, just calling out the product categories that are available at that location, just because obviously foot traffic is going to be pretty dramatically limited during COVID. So just making sure that you're putting your offerings in front of your local searchers as much as possible. The last thing I included here is just a few tools and a few people that I like to follow in the industry. Anyone kind of familiar with local SEO, or maybe even SEO in general, would maybe have heard these names in the past. Mike Blumenthal has been around for years and talks really frequently about local SEO, and is a real thought leader in that space. He's one of the co-founders of GatherUp, which is a review generation tool. Darren Shaw of WhiteSpark, which is a citation management tool. They operate out of Canada. Joy Hawkins, I had already mentioned, she spearheaded a lot of the Google My Business spam removal as a key tactic. She's a founder of Sterling Sky. And then Dan Lebson from Local SEO Guide are all just, four of the key members of the local SEO community that I like to keep a close eye on, because they generally seem to be at the forefront of a lot of the industry evolutions. A few tools that are pretty common in the industry as well, ones that we like to play around with sometimes, would include Yext as a citation management or review monitoring tool, Bright Local as a citation management or potentially a GMB optimization tool, GatherUp for review generation, just to optimize your ability to collect feedback, both first party, meaning it's directly tied to your business or lives on your website, and third-party reviews, meaning the Googles, the Yelps, all of that good stuff. We also utilize Stat as a local keyword tracking. It's kind of a more enterprise level keyword tracking tool, but it's really, really great, especially if you're a multi-location business, to be able to implement some really impressive keyword tracking and keyword analysis at a local level. And that's all I've got.
That was great. You nailed the timing too.
Yeah,
cool.
Perfect.
And there are a handful of like questions and comments in the chat.
Okay.
So I am gonna maybe go not exactly in order, because I think some were kind of just observations, which may be good for you to like comment on or note. So Corinne Richardson noted that GMB now has health and safety attributes as well.
Cool.
So,
yeah, they're awesome. Like appointment required, mask required, staff get temperature checks, staff masks, temperature check required. They've been appearing on like all of the listings that I manage over the past couple days.
Excellent.
Is there a schedule? Is there can you put timing on those, or do you actually have to remember to go take those off Knock on wood.
There's not a schedule from what I can tell. It's just attributes, like typical attributes in GMB where you just check things off. So I'm assuming that once COVID is no longer an issue, hopefully soon, we'll have to manually go in and just uncheck them all.
Although who knows, maybe they'll actually wind up saying this is past so it's so much in the rearview mirror, we're just going to shut it off for everyone.
Facebook and Yelp have those attributes as well.
I'd forgotten that I was actually I was driving across the country and we had Yelp was inaccurate on the closing time that was COVID related and Google was accurate. I think it was one of those where I was like not looking at not knowing where it had been updated. So Andy had an observation or a question that feels like it might not be local SEO. Maybe I'll throw that out to the whole crowd though. Has anybody else gotten hit up by a Google rep to set up a COVID data campaign? Or Andy, if you wanted to chime in as to what you're thinking or question, if you got targeted, if you're wondering if that was just you.
Yeah, I didn't know if anyone else has reached out. It was a call center, contacted me and they wanted to actually kind of switch my regular campaign for the company. Again, yeah, not really relevant to local, but I didn't know if anyone else has reached out to by Google's call center to set up a campaign where it pretty much just copied and pasted everything with a link back to the Google account or this lady's. I don't know. It seemed like a scam. I stood away from it.
Yeah.
Back to my own thing.
We'll call it a scam. Sure. You give us your credit card and
yeah, all you had to do is give your social security number and credit card and they could. Okay.
It happened pretty close to the beginning. I haven't made it back to these monthly meetings here for a little bit, but yeah, figured you guys would be the ones to ask about it. Didn't know if I was alone in that or not. Kind of sounds like it. So glad I didn't go with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, Google went through a whole thing where they paused ratings and reviews going live. They paused a lot of COVID related keywords and, people trying to, do exactly that, jump in and scam people. So it was kind of a crazy time for sure. I don't think we didn't see them release the reviews until maybe mid-May, early June.
Yeah, but what I saw for some businesses was they backfilled all of the ones that people had tried to leave. Like there was that gate that was down, and then as soon as that gate was lifted, all of those reviews just kind of like started to appear, which was kind of interesting.
And by interesting, Lincoln, you mean we had a lot of reviews to review? Yes.
Right. Yeah.
So with that, the suggest and edit for the fake listings, like how quickly does that get? I mean, what's the kind of hit rate or success rate of saying this is a fake listing, or does it really vary on how obviously fake it is?
Yeah, it's definitely based pretty much on how obvious it is. Like if it's like one, like the plumber listing that I had shared, like clearly that's not the name of the business. So that one, it could be like as little as a few hours. But I've also like heard back from, 6 months ago, I requested an edit or a removal of a listing and then finally heard back and I'm like, oh, wow, I forgot I even did that. So it really determines on how easily Google can validate that your edit or the spam listing that you submitted was actually accurate.
Yeah, or the level of rep that you have at Google or whatever. So,
Lincoln, have you ever tried using the business redressal complaint form that Joy talks about?
Yep. So we do that.
Worked for you?
Yeah, we do that for spam removal, especially if it's like a not obvious one. The suggest and edit feature works really well. Like sometimes we pursue both, but suggest and edit works pretty well if it's like clearly a residential business or a residence that a business like clearly doesn't operate out of that address. But for the ones that are less obvious or look like they could be like maybe even old addresses for a business that no longer exists at that location, we do submit using the business redressal form. So we kind of use both in different cadences and in different scenarios.
Is the business redressal part of the Google My Business, or is that a separate?
It's a form that Google allows people to fill out just for the sole purpose of submitting incorrect information that appears on Google Maps.
Got it. So a couple questions. Brian and I both had questions about the multiple locations. So Brian's question was, would you recommend creating areas served pages to help users and Google kind of define your service area?
So an example of that would be like, if you're in Columbus, would you create service pages for Worthington and Hilliard and Grandview Heights and Upper Arlington and, you know, Clintonville? And
Yeah, it depends on a few things. If you have a physical address at the location, then generally that's going to warrant a location page. For some websites we've seen, like they have the top level page that's just like, you know, services in Columbus, and then within that, some pages that have physical addresses have their own locations, or some pages don't if they don't have a physical address, but they you know, send service people out to this particular suburb. If there's a lot of search opportunity, meaning a lot of people are utilizing the like geo-modifying the term with a particular suburb, then sometimes that can warrant having its own page in the same way that you'd kind of justify having a landing page for a particular SEO related strategy or keyword. You would justify it in the same way. If there's a common geo-modifier that people are using, then you can either use that suburb or geo-modifier on your main location page, or potentially justify having a separate location page just for that service area.
Cool. So Katie was curious as to how, and I'm not sure I fully understand this, how everyone's handling the virtual offices for clients who push that and kind of can meet clients there if needed, but it isn't their main office. So
yeah, like a Regis office or a WeWork office, I'm assuming that means.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I think one of the things to call out that we've started to weave into regular parts of the conversation is calling out business changes as frequently and wherever really possible. So I know we called out like location pages as one of those areas, or Google My Business posts, but we've also seen and helped clients create opportunities to call those out, like even in photos. So like putting it in a photo directly on your Google My Business listing. So it's your cover photo, like, you know, just a screenshot of text that outlines the changes to your business, including it in the business description directly on Google My Business. So I think calling it out and making people as aware as possible that, you know, the services that you're offering have changed and that you're now doing this instead of this is probably the best way to pursue it. And very recently, Google released like the virtual appointments attribute, which I think just sends people to Zoom, if I remember correctly. I haven't actually like played around with it a lot, but it can send people to like Zoom or to Google Meet, or things of that nature. Like if you do offer virtual appointments and you want people to be able to take that route instead.
Well, so, but does that, because Brian sort of threw in like the WeWork, or what if it's you're a small business that's out of like, I don't know, Rev One Ventures or somewhere. Does Google, does it start to get a little like, wait a minute, these are 5 local businesses that have the same address, or does it handle that?
Yeah, you could run into issues with working in like a co-working space. Generally, I think like by Google's guidelines, you're supposed to have like a physical business to be able to meet customers in. But we have seen people utilize co-working spaces or even verify listings with PO boxes. It's not always like the best tactic to pursue, but sometimes if it's like, for instance, like a service location where you just like house all of your trucks there and then you go out and provide services at people's homes, as long as it's a physical location, even if you don't have a person in that office, that's sometimes a workaround that you can consider too.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's some guidelines up on Google My Business on Google's knowledge thing, but I seem to recall it's a little outdated on that. But yeah, because it changed, like people try to do the UPS thing, and
yeah,
and they're like, we're not doing that. And then and you know, there was like put you know, you need to have signage on the outside, and you know, be able to claim the suite, and you know, attach the NAP data to the location.
Yep.
It's just reminding me why like doing SEO to me is right up there with being like a second grade teacher. What kind of,
that's
what are you masochist? Why do you do this?
That's the better point. It's not necessarily the location. It's you do a better job with your SEO and not a physical attribute of your SEO with location.
Mm-hmm.
So I think watching time, Tony had a question, which is also intriguing. So he said he's seen recommendations that all businesses should have a Google My Business page, local or not. So does Google My Business provide an SEO signal for non-local searches? And then his example was, would Adept rank better in SEO services outside of Ohio by having a Google My Business in Columbus?
So I guess one way to answer that would be like, you can have service area businesses. So you can designate your business as having a service area, but you don't actually provide services at a physical address. That's an option within Google My Business. So let's say like you're a plumber, but you live and work out of your home. It works really well for like home services like plumbers or carpenters or things of that nature, where you provide the services within a geographic area, but you don't provide them out of a brick and mortar location. So that's one way to delineate. We also like include service areas within Google My Business, even if it is like a physical location, like a brick and mortar location. So you can actually call out within the Google My Business attributes in the dashboard, call out the geographic areas that your business serves. So that would be one way to optimize against like, hey, I want to appear in this geographic area, even though I'm not physically located within that proximity. You could have an opportunity to show up there if you include it in your geographic like areas that you serve.
Well, like using the Adept example, you're not in any way penalizing your ability to have somebody in Nebraska or Portland or Seattle because you're kind of presumably have kind of got local SEO in good shape, but you can define like, oh, but our service area is the US or the service area is the world, and Google doesn't think that's fishy because of the nature of the, I guess, does that go by business category or? Yeah,
I think like with, it comes down to like again, like the intent of the search. Like you're probably not gonna be able to rank like for marketing agencies near me or something if you're not actually physically located near the searcher. And I would always advise against like creating Google My Business listings for the sake of showing up in a certain market that you want to get business in. But there are other opportunities to produce a knowledge panel, like for someone searching for branded, like if someone was actually searching for Adept Marketing, but they weren't located within Columbus, Ohio, then we might want to populate like a brand knowledge panel instead of a local knowledge panel. So that we're actually showing like our overall business information with a link back to our homepage rather than our local business information with like our physical address. That would kind of be a tactic to consider, but that really ties back to just like people actually searching for the brand name rather than searching for like near me searches or local intent searches.
Yeah, Google in general now personalizes by proximity. So, if you are the greatest SEO agency in Alaska, you're not going to show up in my results in Columbus, Ohio. So.
Got it.
And
So,
Tim, to answer your question real quick about the, slash Columbus and Cleveland in the slug. If you have that as part of NAP data, so your name, address, phone number, so you've got a Cleveland office, you got an Atlanta office, having separate pages for that would be good. But if you're just all in Atlanta, you're going to have that NAP data on every page anyway, presumably.
Oh, so it's already figures out that this is where you are. Gotcha. Yeah, I wasn't going to dominate the questions. So watching the time, I'm going to say there are opportunities. There's a couple of, and Corinne, thanks she posted the link to the business redressal form. So there's a couple other things in the chat, but I am going to, and I did forget to start the recording, by the way, Lincoln, until you were like, I don't know, a minute and a half in, but still fairly early. So, but I'm going to stop the recording